Give me the last time a standard legal set actually made a legitimate impact in Modern. It feels like we're talking about pre-Horizon days, because nowadays we get like a standard legal card. It's a cool like sideboard include or like a 1 or 2 of that helps like a tier 2 archetype. Very rarely do we get the effects on the top of the metagame. That's for the Horizon sets to do. But Ketramose The New Dawn breaks that mold. And in today's video, I wanted to go over the 3 specific categories and or decks that this card is really making waves in. Talk about some of the interactions that we can look forward to and why this card has like skyrocketed to like $50. Obviously there are other impacts in terms of Commander and Standard and just various other formats, but specifically when it comes to Modern playability, it's no joke. It's being played in multiple different places, and it has people worried about how powerful it is. Now, so far so good in terms of I don't think this is going to get banned. We're still on the idea of probably banning something out of Energy and probably banning something out of the Breach decks. Ketramose is fine, but it does a lot of powerful things in terms of the value that it presents. And I think a lot of people were catching up to this, especially closer to the release with Spike's video talking about its value in Orzhov Blink, which we'll talk about. But let's read through the card and not bury the lead here. Black, white, and 1. It's a 3 mana Orzhov legendary creature god 4/4. Ketramose The New Dawn has Menace, Lifelink, and Indestructible. Very powerful keywords. Ketramose can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile, which is a restriction similar to the old Theros gods when we first started getting that key type. Those gods were concerned about your devotion, very thematic to the plane, and so the amount of colors that you have on the battlefield. Ketramose by itself cares about the amount of cards in exile in general, so it could be on your opponent's side, it could be on your side. But it says whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from graveyards enter battlefields during your turn. So specifically, you have to remember this is about like batch exiling. So if you had a card like Nihil Spellbomb and you exiled someone's graveyard, that only triggers once. And notably, it doesn't trigger from hand, it doesn't trigger from deck. So if you were to cast like Katasha's Hideous Laughter, that wouldn't trigger that. But again, Nihil Spellbomb would, or something like a Pat Exile, kind of exiling something off the battlefield on your turn specifically. That's when you'll get the trigger of you draw a card and lose 1 life. So ideally you want to get this type of value going with like subtle individual pieces of exile. So like Prismatic Ending and Point Removal is really good, but we're going to start to see how in Orzhov Blink, we get a lot of incidental exile that a lot of people aren't aware of, especially when it comes to different effects that have like random payoffs. I think a lot of people right now, even in Pauper, are learning through cards like Magmic and Artillerist that discarding actually happens when you cycle a card. Cycling a card is like discarding is part of the cycle effect. So discard payoffs like Magmic and Artillerist are actually really valuable when it comes to things like this. So I really like Ketramose for that, teaching people new interactions, specifically when it comes to stuff like Ephemerate and Blink effects. Now, Ephemerate essentially reads with Ketramose out that on your turn, if you were to flicker something, that means you would flicker that card, lose a life, and draw a card. Really powerful, especially when you're able to rebound it after the fact. That rebound happens on your next upkeep. So if Ketramose is not gone, very naturally, it's going to happen on your turn. You're going to get that value. You're going to get that draw, and you're just going to be able to continue your advantage, not contain. And when it comes to Orzhov Blink, we have a lot of individual exile effects throughout the deck. Overlord of the Bilmerk, when it enters or attacks, mill 4 cards, then you may return target non-avatar creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. Now that's returning, that's not exile. Overlord tends to be like a payoff, but specifically Overlord is really there to get flickered by Ephemerate or something like Felia. And so that's where we're going to start to see some of those exile synergies happen, because flickering is exile. That's part of that cost. You exile it, you bring it back from that zone. And so we're going to get that value from Felia. We're going to get that from Skyclave Apparition, Emperor of the Bones exiles as well. There's so many exile effects in here. Part of the spice of this specific list is we see something like Relic of Progenitus that I really want to touch on later in the video. So I'm going to skip it for now, but Relic of Progenitus is really powerful when it comes to effects like this. Even Solitude comes in, exiles a creature, really powerful when it comes to triggering Ketramose. Now, there's a lot of not only self-contained synergies in here, there's a lot of life gain to make sure that your life tends to stay healthy. What I like about Ketramose is that it becomes like this value creature. It becomes something that you can attack with eventually. You tend to do have enough exiled creatures, and you're just going to be able to use it in a quote-unquote fair way as a way to generate an engine. But there are ways to abuse this in terms of a combo, and that specifically is going to come in turn with Psychic Frog. Now, really, you're going to see the Esper type of frog list going kind of without this combo, because I think it was like a really exciting one that a lot of people were talking about with the onset of Aetherdrift. And I actually think this combo does have viability, because the card that really shines with it is really good in my opinion against the energy decks right now. But Psychic Frog just at face value, you can exile 3 cards from your graveyard and Psychic Frog gains flying until the end of turns. You have to just have this like quote unquote free way to exile cards from your graveyard, not only to give it flying, but also draw a card. That draw card you're going to be able to then discard to then buff this thing, and then you can attack and then draw another card, which you could potentially discard later down the line. And so discarding really works well with some of the unearth mechanics that you have. Abhorrent Oculus is going to be able to feed your graveyard. So there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with stuff like Psychic Frog. Now, when it comes to the combo itself, you're obviously going to be playing stuff like the Psychic Frog. You might be playing Murktide Region. You could be playing cards like Cling to Dust. You know, the comeback of Cling to Dust, one of my favorite cards of all time when it comes to just the value that it provides. But the key is Dark Blast. Now, Dark Blast is one of our classic dredge cards. 1 mana, 1 black at instant speed, target creature gets -1/-1. And you could do fun tricks in the old dredge days where you could like Dark Blast on upkeep, then it goes in your graveyard. On your draw, you dredge it back, and then you could Dark Blast again, and you can kind of get 2/2s. But the idea with Dark Blast is that it was a great way to like kill off weenie creatures. Now, back in the day, you were killing like Llanowar Elves with it. Nowadays, you could be killing 2/1 cat tokens, Guide of Souls, but you could be killing Ocelot Prides and its early tokens. So there's a lot of value with something like Dark Blast. But the key to something like Dark Blast is that the combination goes as such. You have Ketramose out, you have a Psychic Frog out. Ideally, you're attacking with the Psychic Frog. Then what you can do is you can, instead of drawing with the Ketramose, you can discard the Dark Blast from your hand, and then you can exile some amount of cards in your graveyard. So you already have to have a little bit fed into there. And then exiling those cards will trigger the draw on your Ketramose, but instead of drawing, you will dredge the Dark Blast back, putting exactly 3 cards back into your graveyard, and then you can discard the Dark Blast again to the Psychic Frog, buff it again, and then the loop continues. So obviously this isn't a quote-unquote infinite loop. You're of course losing life to this, and you're of course having to deal with a certain amount of cards left in your deck, whichever kind of comes first. If you have more life than 20, then sure. So there's a determinate amount that you can use this card, but in a world where Lightning Bolt isn't the most commonly played card in the world, there isn't burn running around, this actually is like not a bad option when it comes to that. It's on a threat that's going to be able to get really large, get over top with its flying in certain matchups, and so this is a combination that some decks are using. Again, I should mention that largely Esper, Ketramose, Esper, Murktide, not really using Dark Blast now. It's kind of like this fun little one of. I think a lot of decks should. It's like a fun one, but I think the Esper decks are really just opting to go without it. Ketramose is just a great value engine. You get prismatic endings, you get permanent exile. Like you just don't have to re-deal with things. And exiling is really powerful right now. White splashes are really powerful when it comes to things like Stony Silences, as you'll see in the sideboard here against the Breach decks. And so there's a lot of powerful things that you get out of playing with white. And so having that main board life gain and that overtime value engine that you get with something like Ketramose is really powerful. And again, we see cards like a Ghost Vacuum, which can every turn kind of ping something out, draw you some cards on your turn, but also Relic of Progenitus. And that's a common one that we're going to see again in this third way that Ketramose can be abused. And when it comes to that, it's going to be Relic of Progenitus. Now, Relic of Progenitus is really interesting. It essentially, for 2 mana, with Ketramose out, can draw you 3 cards and lose you 3 life. So you have to pay 1 to play the relics. That's 1 mana. And then what you can do is you can tap the Relic of Progenitus to exile a card on your turn. That triggers the Ketramose once, so you're going to lose 1 life and draw a card. So you exile 1 card. Then you can pay another and exile the Relic of Progenitus. And the key is that this is a card exiled from your battlefield. So this activation will actually trigger Ketramose as well. Then the exile all cards from all graveyards will then trigger the Ketramose again. Actually, this is kind of 2 mana draw 4 cards. I forgot that Relic, yes, does draw you a card on exile. So with Ketramose out, Relic of Progenitus is 2 mana, draw 4 cards, lose 3 life. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's a whole lot of cards drawn. And so there's a lot of power when it comes to things like this. And so I think a lot of people are really excited to be using this. You're going to be seeing a lot of random decks that are using Ketramose to have like 1-ofs or 2-ofs or something like Relic of Progenitus. It's a really fun little card because on all aspects of the card, you are able to abuse it. Now, when it comes to other options that you have outside of Relic of Progenitus, yes, this is a good one. You also have options like Surgical Extraction. Surgical Extraction, more commonly used in the legacy formats, a little older formats. We do see it now with Breach kind of going about the modern format, a deck that will mill itself, and so it opens its graveyard up to you surgical extracting it. I have come across decks that as a mill player will surgically extract me, but that's kind of what the key is here. The only deck that can use Surgical Extraction well are the mill decks, because the breach decks will mill themselves, but in every other matchup, Surgical's kind of dead. So mill has to kind of mill you out to make the graveyard an extension of their Thoughtseize, which Surgical kind of becomes. And so Surgical is a great way to stop the combo decks, but also enable Ketramose, because it'll only trigger once. You're not going to be able to, draw cards off of Surgical getting cards out of hand or out of deck, but you do get something out of the cards getting exiled out of graveyard. And so in a deck that naturally wants to be using cards like this in the main board anyway, ultimately, I've tricked all of you. This video isn't really just about Ketramose and showcasing it. This is a giant psyop, and this is just me finding a way to showcase Ketramose mill to you, because this is what I'm going to be posting later this week. Haha, I got you. Come on, leave a like on the video if you're a fan of that. Come on, y'all. Ketramose mill, I had to force it. Now, in no way is this going to be the most competitive deck in the world. In no way is this supposed to be some sleeper build that I'm saying is going to take over your RCQ. No, it's not going to do that. It's not going to do that, but it's going to be a whole lot of fun. You got the 4, you got the 8 crabs. I'm playing 3 Ketramose. 4 kind of makes it so I want to draw it every single game. That's not me. I don't want it every single game, because at some point I'm going to have this card stuck in my hand, which is going to be the central problem. I'm playing 4 Fractured Sanity to kind of feed the graveyard for my Surgicals I'll showcase. 3 Preordain. I'm not running Visions in this because there's a lot of exile effects that we'll see in a second. And then Prismatic Ending instead of Fatal Push, just something we get access to. I think like permanently getting rid of things is going to be really valuable for us. And also it's a way to like deal with smaller like ramp pieces. So against like the Eldrazi decks, since we're going up to 3 colors, it actually is pretty reasonable for us to like Prismatic Ending a random Talisman. We do lose the ability without Fatal Push to like get rid of some of the bigger things that they have, but we do have Path to Exiles, as we'll see down here. And Tasha's Hideous Laughter, again, a card that's not really going to trigger the Ketramose, but it's going to enable the Ketramose. So we can 99% of the time pay 3 mana and exile 7 or more cards, right? Like really the fight for this card is usually like, is it on rate with Fractured Sanity? Are we able to mill 14 or more? That's usually the argument that we have. But I'm pretty sure Tasha's can exile like 7 cards and enable that, and then Ketramose can all of a sudden attack, block, have menace, have link, indestructible. It's going to be that free 4 life every turn, give us the time we need to survive in the game. Archive Traps, obviously that's the meme win. Cling to Dust, because I love this card. It probably can become like the 4th Preordain or something, but I'm forcing Cling to Dust. I'm forcing Cling to Dust because it exiles a target and I can escape it. There's a world where I like that. I like that. I like having options. Path to Exiles is a top end, not only just against Eldrazi, but being able to get Murktide Regents. We don't have Drownal Locks in this deck. There just aren't enough slots for it. So it's very proactive. You're not really holding up too much mana. Obviously, you can hold up Cling to Dust and Relic activations, but 4 Surgicals across the main board, because not only is something like Breach already a great matchup for us, but just being able to get rid of the combo decks, random graveyard things that can return. If we can mill over like a Psychic Frog and get rid of that, that's great. Relic of Progenitus as this like value engine. We don't have stuff like our Visions of Beyond. And so I want to make sure I'm able to draw big. And so I like that interaction of how Relic of Progenitus can be that very big, bursty type of draw for us. It is a lot of life, but Ketramose can come back and hopefully gain us some of that life back. The mana base, I'm not 100% on it, but kind of basic. 3 Field of Ruins, 4 white base fetches, 4 black base fetches. All of them can search blue. 3 blue basics because you are kind of blue maxed. Basic Plains, Hollowed Fountain, Swamp, whatever. And like all the good stuff, in here. You have the Oboro in there. You have the Ultawar as like a catch-all. This deck can be kind of light to like Planeswalkers. Like I'm thinking Karn the Great Creator specifically, depending on how they're defending it. So kind of got to be careful of that, but it's something to think about. Out of the sideboard, I'm not 100% on this either. The Ensnaring Bridges, I'm still kind of about. I'm not really playing any board wipes, so I don't know how I really want to take it. But regardless, I'm playing so much removal across the 75. I'm playing 2 more Path on the side just to be able to get rid of big things. 1 more Tasha's Hideous Laughter to help kind of even more edge out the combo matchup, and just some of those like low CMC matchups as well. Extirpate as extra combo hate, specifically maybe not against like the graveyard decks, but specifically against the combo decks. And then Crypt Incursions just as that extra hedge, like because I'm not playing board wipes. When it comes to beating something like the energy decks, you want to make sure that you have Crypt Incursion as soon as possible. And so usually slots like that would be taken up with like a Damnation or like a Knighted Souls Betrayal or a Oh my god, that black X enchantment that I can't think of the name of right now, but something like that is really great. And then 4 Consign the Memory, because the Eldrazi matchup's like really tough. I know there are like a few mill players actually trying like Spreading Seas, because like stopping their mana is like really powerful. Since I'm only playing 3 Field of Ruins, it kind of sucks on that avenue, so I like just having that full play set and being able to stop those decks. So altogether, this is the Ketramose mill deck. This is the showcase that I wanted to do. I will be making some gameplay of this in the coming days. I do want to kind of force something like this. I know many of y'all are looking for like my list, my competitive list, and doing all that. Hey, look, you got better mill players than me. I'm the content creator. I'm going to show y'all some of the fun stuff. I'm going to do the stuff that y'all don't want to do. The other mill players, go join the mill Discord. The mill Discord has some killers in there. Y'all are like 5-0ing, doing really well at locals and all that stuff. Like, you got good mill players over there. You don't need me for that, okay? I've done my job in bringing people to the good ways of mill. Go find those good players. Let's do something fun here. But anyway, let me know what you think about Ketramose in the comment section down below. Have you played against Ketramose? Have you been playing with Ketramose? How have you been abusing him? And how have you been using him outside of the modern format? I'm kind of interested to see how we can abuse him in Commander. There's some really funny combos that I've been thinking of when it comes to Ketramose. But regardless, that's what I have for today. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and happy exiling, folks.